The sun was setting over LaGuardia Airport, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. It was just another busy evening at one of New York's busiest airports, with travelers rushing to catch their flights and airport staff going about their daily routines. But this particular evening was about to become anything but ordinary. Donald Trump hadn't planned on spending his evening in the main terminal of LaGuardia. His private jet, usually ready and waiting whenever he needed it, had run into some unexpected mechanical issues. The maintenance team had apologetically informed him that it would take at least 3 hours to fix the problem. After years of traveling in ultimate luxury, the former president found himself in an unusual situation, waiting in the airport terminal just like everyone else. "Sir, we can arrange for a private waiting area," one of his security team members suggested, noticing how other travelers were starting to recognize the distinctive figure in their midst. Trump waved off the suggestion with a slight smile. No, let's stay here. Sometimes it's good to be among the people." He settled into one of the standard airport chairs, his tall frame making the seat look somewhat small in comparison. People nearby couldn't help but do double takes. It wasn't every day you saw a former president sitting in regular airport seating. The terminal was bustling with its usual mix of travelers. Business people in suits tapped away on their laptops, families tried to keep their children entertained, and tourists chatted excitedly about their upcoming adventures. The smell of coffee from a nearby cafe mixed with the distinctive airport atmosphere, a combination of excitement, stress, and anticipation that anyone who's ever traveled would instantly recognize. Trump observed the scene with interest. Despite his wealth and status, he had always prided himself on understanding regular people. He watched as a young couple shared earbuds while watching something on their phone, an elderly woman knitted peacefully in her seat, and a group of college students played cards on the floor, making the best of their layover. His security detail maintained a professional but relaxed presence nearby, dressed in plain clothes to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Yet despite their efforts to stay low-key, word was starting to spread through the terminal. Whispers and pointed fingers indicated that more and more people were realizing who was sitting among them. A few brave souls approached for selfies, which Trump graciously accepted. "How are you folks doing?" he'd ask, showing genuine interest in their stories. Each interaction drew more attention, and soon a small crowd had gathered, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly fascinated by this unusual situation. The atmosphere in the terminal was charged with a unique energy. Some people were excited, others curious, and a few seemed unsure how to react. Trump handled it all with surprising ease, showing a side of himself that many people rarely got to see, just another traveler dealing with the universal experience of a delayed flight. "You know, I've built buildings, I've run businesses, I've been president," he commented to a nearby family, "but sometimes life reminds you that we're all just people trying to get somewhere." This drew chuckles from those within earshot, appreciating the humility in his words. The security team remained vigilant but relaxed, as the situation seemed well under control. The airport staff, initially nervous about having such a high-profile passenger in the regular terminal, began to ease up as they saw how smoothly everything was going. It was during this relatively peaceful scene that the first signs of trouble began to emerge. At first, it was just raised voices from a nearby gate, nothing unusual in an airport where stress and tension often run high. But something about the tone of these voices caught Trump's attention. His years of experience in dealing with people had given him a sixth sense for when situations were about to escalate. He turned his head toward Gate B7, where the commotion was growing louder. His security detail also noticed the change in his attention and subtly adjusted their positions. What Trump saw make him straighten in his seat. A confrontation was brewing, and from what he could tell, it wasn't just about a missed flight or lost luggage. This was something different, something that would require careful handling. The sun had now fully set outside the large terminal windows, and the artificial lights of the airport cast a harsh glow over the scene. As Trump watched the situation unfold, he knew that his unexpected evening at LaGuardia was about to become even more memorable. The question was, how would he handle what was about to happen? To be continued. The commotion at Gate B7 was growing louder, cutting through the usual background noise of the airport. Trump watched as people began to turn their heads toward the disturbance, their conversations dying down as they sensed the tension in the air. He could see a family, a mother, father, and 3 young children, being confronted by an elderly man who was becoming increasingly agitated. The family was dressed in traditional Middle Eastern clothing, the mother wearing a beautifully embroidered hijab, the father in a clean-pressed suit with a neatly trimmed beard. Their children, probably aged between 6 and 12, stood close to their parents, looking confused and frightened by the unfolding situation. They shouldn't even be here. The elderly man's voice carried across the terminal, his face reddening with each word. He was tall and thin, wearing a veteran's cap covered in pins and leaning on a cane. "This is our country. I fought for this country." The father tried to maintain his composure, speaking in perfect English with a slight accent. "Sir, we're just trying to catch our flight, like everyone else. Please, there's no need for this." The mother pulled her children closer, whispering words of comfort as they clung to her sides. The youngest child, a little girl, buried her face in her mother's dress, while the older ones watched with wide, uncertain eyes. Other passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some pretended not to notice, burying their faces deeper in their phones or magazines. Others watched openly, but no one seemed sure whether or not to intervene. A young airport staff member hovered nearby, looking desperately toward her supervisor for guidance. Trump felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced countless times when facing important decisions. He'd seen situations like this before, both in his business dealings and during his presidency. The easy thing would be to stay seated, to let airport security handle it. But something about the scene struck a deeper chord. He thought about all the people who had worked for him over the years, people from every background imaginable who had helped build his business empire. He thought about the countless Americans he'd met during his campaigns and presidency, each with their own unique story of what made them proud to be American. The elderly man's voice was rising again. "I spent 2 years in Vietnam, and now they just let anyone walk in here like they own the place." His cane trembled in his grip as he gestured wildly. The father maintained his dignity, still trying to reason with the man. "Sir, I understand your service. I'm actually a doctor at Veterans Affairs. I've probably treated some of your fellow veterans." But the elderly man wasn't listening anymore. His face had grown even redder, and he took a threatening step forward. The mother quickly pulled her children back, and several nearby passengers gasped. Trump's security team noticed him shifting in his seat. "Sir," one of them warned quietly, "we should probably stay out of this." But Trump was already standing up, straightening his tie with a familiar gesture that many had seen on television countless times. The crowd that had gathered around him earlier parted as he began walking toward Gate B7. People who had been pretending not to notice the confrontation suddenly found their attention drawn to the former president's movement. As he approached, more people began to notice. Phones came out, recording what was about to unfold. The elderly man was so focused on the family that he hadn't noticed Trump's approach, but the family had. The father's eyes widened in recognition, and even the children peeked out curiously. Trump could hear his security detail following at a discreet distance, could feel the eyes of hundreds of travelers on him. He knew that whatever happened next would likely be all over social media within hours. But sometimes, he thought, that's exactly why you need to act, because people need to see what's right. He was just a few steps away now. The elderly man still hadn't noticed him, but everyone else in the vicinity had fallen silent, waiting to see what would happen. The air felt charged with anticipation. Even the usual airport announcements seemed to have faded into the background. Trump took a deep breath. In his years of public life, he'd handled all sorts of difficult situations. But here, in this airport terminal, he had a chance to do something that might actually change a few minds, that might show people a different way forward. He was close enough now to hear the family's youngest child whimpering softly, to see the tension in the father's shoulders as he tried to protect his family while maintaining his dignity, to notice the tremor in the elderly veteran's hands as he gripped his cane. The moment had come to step in, and Trump knew exactly what he needed to do. To be continued. Trump stepped forward, his presence immediately drawing attention from everyone nearby. The elderly veteran, still focused on the family, hadn't noticed him yet. Trump cleared his throat and spoke in his distinctive voice, "Excuse me, folks, but I couldn't help overhearing what's going on here." The elderly man spun around, his eyes widening in shock as he recognized who was addressing him. His mouth opened and closed a few times, the anger on his face replaced by surprise. The cane in his hand lowered slightly as he straightened up instinctively, the old military training kicking in. "Mr. President," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. The redness in his face now seemed more from embarrassment than anger. Trump moved to stand between the veteran and the family, but in a way that included everyone in the conversation. His years of experience in front of cameras and crowds had taught him exactly how to position himself to diffuse tension while maintaining everyone's dignity. "You know," Trump began, his voice carrying just far enough for the gathered crowd to hear without shouting, "I've spent my life building things. Hotels, golf courses, businesses, you name it. And you want to know something interesting? I couldn't have done any of it alone." The veteran was listening now, his grip on the cane relaxing slightly. The family behind Trump remained quiet, but he could sense them listening intently too. "Some of the best people I've ever worked with," Trump continued, "came from all over the world. Engineers from India, architects from China, contractors from the Middle East." He gestured toward the family. "People who came here because they believed in the American dream, the same dream you fought to protect." The elderly man's expression began to shift. Trump noticed the various military pins on his cap and pointed to one in particular. "Vietnam, 1968, he asked. The veteran nodded, standing a little straighter. 69th Infantry Division, sir." "Tough times," Trump acknowledged, his voice softening. "You know, this gentleman here," he gestured to the father of the family, "he told you he works at the VA? He's a doctor who helps veterans like yourself every day. That's his way of serving our country." The doctor stepped forward slightly, his children still close but now watching with curiosity rather than fear. "I've been at the VA hospital for 8 years, he said quietly. "It's my honor to serve those who served our country." Trump noticed someone in the crowd wiping away tears. Phones were still recording, but now people were smiling rather than anxious. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere, from tension to something more hopeful. The veteran looked at his shoes for a moment, then back at the family. His hands fidgeted with his cane. I haven't been sleeping well lately," he admitted. "The memories, they sometimes," his voice trailed off. "Have you been to the VA recently?" Trump asked gently. When the veteran shook his head, Trump turned to the doctor. "Maybe you could help him set up an appointment. Our veterans deserve the best care we can give them." The doctor stepped forward, extending his hand to the veteran. "We have an excellent PTSD program. I'd be happy to help you get connected with the right people." The veteran hesitated for just a moment before taking the offered hand. The simple handshake seemed to break whatever remaining tension hung in the air. The veteran's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time, a small smile crossed his face. Trump watched as the two men began talking quietly about VA services and appointment scheduling. The veteran's demeanor had completely changed, the anger replaced by something that looked like relief, maybe even hope. The mother had relaxed her protective stance around her children, and the youngest one was now peeking out with curiosity. Trump knelt down to their level, despite his suit and the terminal floor. "You know what?" he said to the children. "Your dad is a real American hero too. He helps take care of our soldiers." The children beamed with pride, and their mother's eyes glistened with tears of relief and gratitude. Around them, the crowd of onlookers had grown, but the atmosphere was completely different now. People were smiling, some were nodding in approval, and a few were openly crying. An elderly woman who had been watching everything unfold approached the mother. "Your hijab is beautiful," she said warmly. "The embroidery reminds me of my grandmother's tablecloth." The two women began chatting, and soon others joined in, the terminal transforming from a place of conflict to one of connection. Trump stepped back, watching as the scene continued to unfold naturally. His security team relaxed slightly, seeing that the situation had been completely diffused. He noticed airport staff looking relieved and fellow travelers beginning to share their own stories with each other. Sometimes, he thought, all people need is a reminder of their common humanity. A reminder that beneath our different clothes, accents, and backgrounds, we're all just trying to make our way in the world, trying to build better lives for ourselves and our families. To be continued. As the tension dissolved into friendly conversation, Trump noticed something remarkable happening throughout the terminal. What had started as an ugly confrontation was transforming into something beautiful. People from different walks of life were actually talking to each other, sharing stories, and finding common ground. The veteran, who just minutes ago had been filled with anger, was now sitting in one of the terminal chairs, deep in conversation with the doctor. They had discovered they both loved baseball and were discussing their favorite World Series moments. The veteran's cane rested against his chair, momentarily forgotten as he used his hands to describe a particularly spectacular play. "You should have seen it. Bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, and this rookie comes up to bat," the veteran was saying, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. The doctor leaned forward, equally engaged in the conversation. The children, no longer hiding behind their mother, had brought out their tablets and were showing some other kids nearby their favorite games. The universal language of technology had bridged any perceived gaps, and soon the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Trump watched all this unfold with satisfaction, but he knew there was more work to be done. He'd seen too many moments like this in his life, beautiful moments of understanding that faded once people went back to their regular lives. He wanted this one to be different. "You know what we need here?" he announced, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "We need to share this. Not just the problem we saw, but the solution. Everyone's got phones out. Why not use them to spread something good for a change?" People nodded in agreement. A young college student stepped forward, her phone still recording. "Mr. President, would you mind saying something for my TikTok? This is the kind of thing people need to see." Trump straightened his tie and smiled. "Let's do better than that. Let's get everyone in on this." He waved the veteran and the doctor's family over. "Come on, folks, let's show the world what real Americans look like." The veteran stood up, slightly embarrassed but willing. The doctor and his family joined them. Trump positioned himself between them, one arm around the veteran's shoulders, the other gesturing inclusively toward the family. "Folks watching this," Trump began, looking directly at the various phones recording, "what you're seeing here is the real America. We've got a brave veteran who served our country. We've got a doctor who takes care of our veterans. We've got children who represent our future. And you know what? We're all in this together." The veteran cleared his throat. "I want to say something too, if that's okay." When Trump nodded encouragingly, he continued, "I was wrong earlier. I let my own pain cloud my judgment. But this man here," he gestured to the doctor, "he's not my enemy. He's trying to help people like me. And I forgot that's what America is really about, helping each other." The doctor's wife, who had been quiet throughout most of the encounter, spoke up. "We love this country," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's given our family opportunities we never had before. Our children were born here. This is their home, our home." The terminal had gone quiet as people listened. Even the usual airport announcements seemed to have paused. The only sounds were the quiet clicks of phone cameras and the occasional sniffle from moved observers. One of the airport staff members, who had been watching everything unfold, approached with bottles of water for everyone. "On the house," she said with a warm smile. "It's not every day we get to witness something like this." Trump accepted the water with a nod of thanks. "You see, this is what leadership is really about," he said to the crowd. "It's not about building walls between people. Sometimes it's about building bridges. And sometimes those bridges get built in the most unexpected places, like right here in Terminal B of LaGuardia Airport." People chuckled at that, but they understood the deeper truth in his words. A young businessman in the crowd raised his hand. "Sir, I've got to ask, what made you step in? You could have just stayed in your seat, let security handle it." Trump took a thoughtful sip of water before answering. "You know, throughout my life, I've built lots of things. Buildings, businesses, you name it. But the most important things we build aren't made of steel and concrete. They're the connections we make with each other, the respect we show each other. That's what makes America truly great." As the evening continued, the impromptu gathering at Gate B7 had turned into something unexpected, a genuine moment of community in the most unlikely of places. The crowd had grown, but instead of the usual airport chaos, there was a sense of shared purpose and understanding. A flight attendant who had been watching everything unfold approached Trump with a coffee. "Mr. President, I've been flying this route for 15 years, she said, her voice full of emotion. "I've seen so many arguments, so much tension, but I've never seen anything quite like this." Trump accepted the coffee with thanks, noting how the terminal's atmosphere had completely transformed. The doctor's children were now showing the veteran how to play a game on their tablet, their little faces serious as they explained the rules. The veteran was listening intently, occasionally asking questions that made the kids giggle. "You know what's funny?" Trump said to the growing crowd, "My plane needed repairs, and at first, I thought it was just bad luck. But sometimes the best things happen when our plans get interrupted." A businessman in an expensive suit who had been quietly observing spoke up. "I almost missed this. I was so focused on my phone, my emails, my next meeting, but this?" He gestured around the terminal. "This is real. This matters." The veteran's hands, which had been shaking earlier with anger, were now steady as he held the children's tablet. He looked up at Trump. "Sir, I haven't felt this peaceful in years. I've been carrying around so much anger, so much pain. But these folks," he nodded toward the doctor's family, "they're not so different from my own grandkids." The doctor's wife had begun sharing dates from her carry-on bag, sweet, golden brown ones that she explained were from her mother's garden back home. "In our culture," she explained as she passed them around, "sharing food is a way of sharing friendship." People were taking pictures not just of Trump now, but of each other. The elderly woman who had complimented the wife's hijab was now learning how to properly rep one, laughing as she tried to follow the instructions. Other travelers had pulled their chairs into a circle, creating an impromptu community in the middle of the busy airport. "My phone's been blowing up," a young social media influencer announced, showing her screen. "The video's already going viral. People are asking how they can help veterans, how they can connect with their local VA hospitals." Trump nodded approvingly. "That's the power of social media done right. Instead of spreading anger, we're spreading understanding. Instead of dividing people, we're bringing them together." The airport staff, who initially had been worried about crowd control, now moved through the group offering water and snacks. One of them, an older man with gray hair, approached Trump. "Sir, I've worked here for 30 years. We see all sorts of things in airports. Goodbyes, hellos, arguments, reunions. But this is something special." The doctor had taken out his business card and was writing down specific contacts at the VA for the veteran. "These people specialize in PTSD," he explained gently. "They understand what you're going through. You don't have to handle it alone anymore." The veteran's eyes glistened with tears. "I've been alone for so long," he admitted. "My wife passed away 5 years ago, and since then," his voice trailed off, but the doctor's wife immediately reached out and patted his hand. "You come to our house for dinner next week," she insisted. "Our children need a grandfather figure to spoil them." Her husband nodded in agreement, and the veteran's face lit up with a smile that seemed to erase years of pain. Trump watched all this with satisfaction, but also with a deeper understanding. This wasn't just about resolving one airport confrontation. This was about showing people a way forward, about demonstrating how conversations could replace confrontations, how understanding could overcome fear. A young airport security officer who had been standing nearby approached Trump. "Sir," he said quietly, "we get trained for all sorts of situations, terrorist threats, medical emergencies, you name it. But what you did here today? That's the kind of security no amount of training can teach. You showed us how to make people feel safe by helping them understand each other." The terminal's usual announcements had resumed, but they seemed different now, less intrusive, more like a gentle reminder that life was continuing around their remarkable gathering. A voice came over the speaker announcing that Trump's private jet was ready for departure, but somehow that didn't seem as important anymore. "You know," Trump said, addressing the crowd that had gathered, "I've been in thousands of meetings in fancy boardrooms and official chambers. But sometimes the most important meetings happen in unexpected places, like right here in this airport terminal." The doctor's youngest child had fallen asleep against the veteran's shoulder, completely comfortable with someone who, just an hour ago, had been a frightening stranger. The veteran sat perfectly still, careful not to disturb the sleeping child, a protective look in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "My grandson used to fall asleep on me just like that," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Haven't seen him in a while. Been too caught up in my own troubles, I guess." The doctor's wife pulled out her phone and took a picture of the moment. "Now you'll be in our family photos," she said warmly. And don't forget, dinner next week. My husband will text you the address. A group of college students who had been watching everything unfold approached Trump with an idea. Mr. President, we're studying social work at the local university. Would it be okay if we used this as a case study for our community building project? We think people could learn a lot from what happened here. Trump's face lit up. Now that's what I call making good use of education. You know what would be even better? Why not invite our friends here, he gestured to the veteran and the doctor's family, to speak to your class? Real experiences, real people, real solutions. The students' eyes widened with excitement, and soon they were exchanging contact information with both the veteran and the doctor. The veteran looked overwhelmed but pleased. Never thought I'd be a guest lecturer, he chuckled. But if my story can help others, well, that's what service is all about, isn't it? An airline pilot who had been watching from the sidelines stepped forward. Sir, he addressed Trump, I fly this route 3 times a week. Would you mind if I shared what I witnessed here today during my pre-flight announcements? People need to hear about this kind of thing. Better yet, Trump suggested, why not invite our veteran friend here to the cockpit sometime, show him how the new planes work. The pilot immediately pulled out his card, promising the veteran a tour whenever he wanted. The social media influencer who had been recording earlier raised her hand. The video's gone super viral, she announced. But here's the best part. People are sharing their own stories in the comments. It's starting conversations everywhere. Trump nodded approvingly. You see, that's the real power of social media. Not just showing problems, but showing solutions. Not just pointing out what's wrong, but showing how to make things right. The doctor's middle child tugged at Trump's sleeve. Mr. President, the boy said shyly, when I grow up, I want to help people like my dad does. Do you think I can? Trump knelt down to the child's level, despite his expensive suit. You know what? I think you already are helping people. Look around. You and your family helped teach all of us something important today. The airport staff had begun preparing for the next wave of flights, but they moved around the group carefully, respectfully, as if understanding they were witnessing something special. One of them whispered to her colleague, in 20 years of working here, I've never seen anything like this. The veteran stood up carefully, still holding the sleeping child. You know what the hardest part of war was? He said quietly. Coming home and feeling like nobody understood. But today I feel understood for the first time in years. The doctor's wife wiped away a tear. And you've helped us feel accepted, truly accepted, in a way we haven't before. Our children will remember this day forever. Trump checked his watch. His plane had been ready for a while now. But sometimes, he realized, delays happen for a reason. Sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, in places we least expect to find them. As the evening drew to a close, there was a sense that nobody really wanted to leave. The airport terminal had become more than just a waiting area. It had transformed into a place where real change had happened, where barriers had broken down, and where strangers had become friends. The youngest child had woken up from their nap on the veteran's shoulder, but instead of moving away, they stayed close, holding his hand. The veteran's eyes sparkled with a joy that hadn't been there hours before. You know, he said to Trump, I came to this airport today feeling like the world was against me. Now I feel like I found a whole new family. The doctor checked his watch and smiled. Our flight's been delayed too, he announced. Maybe some delays are meant to be. His wife nodded in agreement, still sharing her homemade snacks with anyone who wanted to try them. A group of high school students who had been quietly watching everything unfold finally gathered the courage to approach. We're working on a project about bringing communities together, one of them explained. Would it be okay if we interviewed everyone about what happened here? Trump looked at the veteran and the doctor's family, who nodded enthusiastically. You know what? Trump said, that's exactly what we need, young people like you telling these stories, because this isn't just about what happened in an airport. It's about who we are as Americans. The airport staff had brought over more chairs, creating a comfortable space for the impromptu interviews. The students pulled out their notebooks, and the veteran went first, speaking with a clarity and peace that he hadn't had before. I was angry, he admitted to the students. Not just today, but for years. I lost my wife, lost touch with my family, felt like the world had moved on without me. But today, he glanced at the doctor's family with warmth, Today I remembered what it feels like to belong somewhere. The doctor spoke next, his words careful and thoughtful. When we first saw the anger directed at us, my first instinct was to protect my family and leave. But sometimes standing your ground with dignity and compassion can lead to unexpected friendships. The young social media influencer, who had been monitoring the online response, spoke up again. The videos inspired people to start airport moments. They're sharing stories of kindness between strangers in public places. It's trending nationwide. Trump smiled at this news. You see, change doesn't always need big speeches or formal programs. Sometimes it just needs people willing to see each other as human beings. The doctor's wife had started exchanging recipes with other travelers, writing them down on the backs of old boarding passes. Food brings people together, she explained. Next week when we host dinner, I'll make dishes from every recipe I collected today. The veteran was already making plans. I'll bring my photo albums from my service days, he said. And maybe I'll call my grandson too. It's been too long. A flight attendant approached the group with news that both flights were finally ready for boarding. Instead of the usual rush to gather belongings and hurry to the gate, everyone moved slowly, reluctant to end this special moment. The veteran stood up, straighter and steadier than he had been hours ago. The doctor's children hugged him tightly, making him promise again to come for dinner. The youngest one wouldn't let go until the veteran promised to teach them more card games next time. Trump watched as phone numbers were exchanged, social media accounts were followed, and final photos were taken. The high school students had filled their notebooks with quotes and observations, their faces glowing with the understanding that they had witnessed something truly meaningful. Before everyone leaves, Trump announced, "I want you all to remember something. What happened here today, this isn't the end of a story, it's the beginning of many stories. Every person here is going to leave with a choice, to keep this moment alive in how we treat others or to let it fade away." The veteran stepped forward, standing tall despite his cane. "I choose to keep it alive," he said firmly. "No more letting anger win. These folks," he gestured to the doctor's family, "they showed me there's a better way." The doctor's wife quickly wrote down their home address for the veteran, along with detailed directions. Next week, she reminded him warmly, "And bring your appetite. I'm cooking enough for an army." As people finally began moving toward their gates, there were hugs, handshakes, and more than a few tears. The terminal, which hours ago had been a place of tension and conflict, now felt like the scene of a family reunion coming to an end. Trump's security team finally managed to guide him toward his gate, but he kept turning back to wave at the group. The veteran and the doctor's family walked together to their own gate, the children skipping between them as if they'd known each other forever. The last thing Trump saw before boarding his plane was the veteran showing the doctor's children how to stand at attention, all of them giggling as they tried to stay serious. It was a perfect final image, a reminder that sometimes the best moments in life come from the most unexpected situations. As his plane finally took off into the night sky, Trump looked down at the glowing lights of LaGuardia Airport below. Sometimes, he thought, the most presidential thing you can do is simply help people see the humanity in each other.